We're going to cover 4 million years of human evolution here. We're going to start with Australopithecus because we definitely want to show pre-human, and I think everybody would agree that Australopiths are pre-human. So starting with everyone's favorite, Lucy, discovered by Donald Johanson in 1974, Australopithecus afarensis. Her species is represented by fossils from over 400 individuals now. They lived in East Africa 3.8 to 2.9 million years ago. Take Lucy's skeleton and you flip it over and superimpose it onto itself. It shows actually how complete it really is. Primates are asymmetrical, so we have a very complete skeleton there. Looking at their skulls, cranial capacity ranged from 375 to 530 cc's. The variation is due to sexual dimorphism, where males would be larger than females. And we're going to pay attention to the cranial capacity here as we go along. No modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers, originating from the same layers as Australopithecus afarensis. So Australopithecus africanus is next up. Again, several hundred fossil specimens have been found, and they overlapped with afarensis in East Africa just for a few 100,000 years. Evidence for bipedalism in Australopithecines. We have placement of the foramen magnum at the base of the skull. We have the attachment of neck muscles to the skull, shape of their spine, angle of their knees. They had no divergent big toe, fixed arches in their foot, side to side and front to back, and the shape of the pelvis, which we can tell whether they were bipedal or not by the shape of their pelvis. Cranial capacity averaged 485 cc's. Compared to afarensis, we see already a less projecting face, more rounded skull, no cranial crest, and smaller dentition. So they're getting a little bit closer to us. And again, no modern human remains ever been found in the same layers as afarensis or africanus. Pithecus sediba was a fairly new one, discovered 2008 by 8-year-old Matthew Berger, son of Lee Berger. We're up to 1.98 million years ago. Homo habilis, again, just under 2 million years ago, first discovered by the Leakeys in Kubifora, Kenya. And these are the early tool makers. Now, we might have seen evidence with tool makers prior, but this is the first species that's associated with tool making by design, with something with an end product in mind. Chimps might use a rock or a stick, but the closest we've seen them to designing tools is stripping leaves off of a stick to get at termites. Homo rudolfensis, which some people will consider Homo habilis, again at 1.9 million years ago, so just under 2 million years. Look at that cranial capacity. Now we're up to 775 cc's. We're seeing a gradual increase here in brain size. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo habilis. Homo erectus, these were the most successful humans so far. They were around for about 1.75 million years. First species to leave Africa. So they were around from 1.89 million years to 143,000 years ago. The early cranial capacity we see on average is 850 cc's, and the later up to 1,100 cc's. So we can see the brain's getting larger again. African Homo erectus, some people will call Homo ergaster. This is one at 1.75 million years with a cranial capacity of 850 cc's. Again, most successful human species so far. Homo erectus turcaniboi skull at 1.5 million years, cranial capacity 880 cc's, discovered in Lake Turkana. We've got turcaniboi. We can tell his age. He still had his wisdom teeth, so that's one of the ways we can tell age from some of these bones in the dirt. Male pelvis, long legs, 5 foot 3 inches tall. Asian Homo erectus, this is one of the skulls discovered in Java, but a more recent discovery, 1969, not the early Java man. Cranial capacity there, 1,000 cc's already we're seeing. Again, we're seeing 435 to 530, average 450 cc's on brain size on the africanus. Homo habilis averages 680. Homo erectus averages 1,000. We're seeing a transition happen right there. And no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers as Homo erectus. Stone tool technology advances with increase in brain size. So here's Heidelbergensis. These are ancestral to Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis, and they were around from about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago. Again, we're kind of looking at where they fit in the chain of things here. We have lots of remains of these guys. There was 28 individuals. We've actually pulled DNA out of these, out of Homo heidelbergensis. We know that they shared a common ancestor with the Denisovans. We're going to get to them in a minute, but also had Neanderthal-like features. This is the Cobway skull, and this would be 300,000 years ago. We're getting to now Heidelbergensis, some would call it Rhodesiensis. So brain case profile like Homo erectus, but the brain size is 1,300 cc's. So by 300,000 years ago, we've seen almost modern human average brain size. And no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. The Neanderthals, everybody's favorite caveman here, found in Europe and Western Asia, went extinct by 39,000 years ago. Again, hundreds of fossil specimens found. First discovered in 1829. They didn't know what it was really. The type specimen, Neander 1, is from the Neander Valley. That's where they got their name. But that was discovered in 1856. This is the most complete Neanderthal skull here, discovered in 1909, 70,000 years old. Cranial capacity over 1,600 cc's. So actually, a lot of these early Neanderthals had a brain size larger than modern humans. There's a lot of differences in the skull. Of course, the shape of the brain case, occipital bun at the back of the skull, used for muscle attachments. Their noses, the nasal bone projected, and they had no chin. They also had the larger brow ridge. So 550,000 years, after the last mating, we can see measurable impacts on gene expression. If you are living in, if you have a European ancestry, you have up to 5% Neanderthal DNA in you. And let's see, they use radiocarbon dates on the Neanderthal remains. It's one of the only species because some of them are below 50,000 years that were able to do that. And we can tell that Neanderthals did not disappear all at once. So they didn't die out one time. They died off at different times, different parts of the world. Denisovans, now this is a fairly new species discovered. The only thing we have is two. Actually, I think they just discovered a third tooth. So we have a couple teeth and a pinky bone. We know that we have the genome, though. Scientists can create timelines for when different populations split. We can tell this because we have the Denisovan genome, the Neanderthal genome, the modern human genome, and the Homo heidelbergensis genome. Homo naledi is a real recent one, discovered in 2013, described by Lieberger in 2015. When they were first discovered, we didn't know how old they were. Again, dated by 6 different methods now. They've got them down to a range between 235 and 335,000 years ago. They were found in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa near Johannesburg. And over 1,500 fossil specimens from 15 individuals were brought up, and Lieberger says there's more down there. There's another fossil Lieberger discovered. That was me right there. I was his opening act at the Mesa Arts Center back in March here, and got to share on the second day with thousands of children talking about human evolution. It's a great outreach thing we do with the museum here in Mesa. Dating methods include electron spin resonance and oxygen isotope analysis, neither of which require us to know initial parent-daughter ratios. Some of the features, again, we're going to kind of breeze through this, but from the waist up, they were almost like an Australopith. Long arms, curved fingers, small shoulders, small head, but from the waist down, they were just like modern humans. Again, over 1,500 specimens, but wait, there's more. The Lissetti chamber. Lieberger announced more individuals. 3 more individuals were found in a different chamber. He announced that on May 9th of this year. And again, no modern human remains have ever been found in the same layers. This is the little hobbit guy, Homo floresiensis. They nicknamed him the Hobbit because their adults were only 3.5 feet tall, and they had big feet. So we do find them using crude stone tools, though, and fire pits. We find the bones, charred bones. We also know now that it looks like they evolved from Homo habilis. They are not a dwarf species of Homo erectus. Now, looking 200 to 300,000 years ago, we had all these different human species alive on different parts of the planet. Genetic evidence, we've completed genomes for all these. Accumulation of neutral mutations occurs with enough regularity to provide a molecular clock. It gives us an estimate of how long ago each species diverged, and it aligns with our known fossil record. And the DNA studies also align with the known fossil record. Archaeology, if we want to talk about bones in the dirt, what can we learn from the study of osteoarchaeology? A lot of times we would know where the person lived, where we found them. We would know when they lived because we can date the fossils. How old they were when they died, a lot of times we can tell that. Sometimes we can tell how they died. We know of, for example, of a murder that occurred in Spain 430,000 years ago. Sometimes we can tell whether they died of disease, whether they were killed, male or female. And we can see primitive versus derived traits, being early traits that we see in species that came before, and then the derived traits would be something that shows up then and continues on after that. Forensic facial reconstruction, because I know there's going to be people saying, oh gosh, look at, he used all those pictures, they made those up. Well, we can tell what a species looked like. No one really knows what an individual looked like, but forensic facial reconstruction is a real thing. It's been used to solve crimes. It's makes for a great visual presentation too. So dating fossils is done using both absolute and relative dating methods following scientific laws. So if anyone's going to say we can't date these fossils, they've got two scientific laws here that they're going to have to show why we should not accept them. Testing our theory. How would we test the theory of evolution? And as far as human evolution, we would, to test the hypothesis about the change of kind from early species to modern humans, we would predict that we would find evidence in the fossil record for such a transitional change. We would predict the recent layers would contain modern humans. At some point, anatomically, modern humans would cease to exist in the fossil record, and we would only see evidence of species with both those primitive and derived traits, becoming more primitive as the fossils get older, ending up with only these early apes in the oldest layers. That's exactly what we see. We never see human remains in with any of these primitive species or older fossil remains. Never see it. Over 6,000 individuals now we have cataloged in hominin evolution. We're just talking about humans here. If you lined up all these skulls and put them in a row, you're seeing microevolution from one to the other. And if you look at it over it as a whole, it's becomes macro. I mean, you can line up Australopithecus on the left, modern human on the right, and every little minor change is a macro change. But you go back and look at the first skull and the last skull, and everybody's going to say, oh yeah, that's a different species. That's macroevolution. We just witnessed a change in kind by studying the fossil record. Australopithecus africanus female on the left, Homo sapiens female on the right. I don't think anybody's going to disagree that we have two different species. So millions of years of human evolution, the evidence cannot be denied. Charles Darwin would be pleased to see the transitional species in the fossil record today, just as predicted. Thank you.
But he did not have on that list, nor could he put on that list, that you could prove that those specimens that you found had any children at all. Certainly you couldn't prove they had children that lived. And if you're going to claim that these are transitional between something, you have to find not only that they had children or prove they had children, and they also had to find a mate who had the similar characteristics that went on. So lining up a bunch of bones you found in the dirt, everything in his presentation would be thrown out in the first 10 seconds in an honest court of law, because what he found are bones in the dirt. The Bible teaches clearly that before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old. Now, the Bible says clearly in Genesis chapter 1, that God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So God created man in his own image. The evolution theory teaches we are improving and getting better, and someday we get to become like God, which is the same lie Satan told Eve in the Garden of Eden. The reality is, I think humans are getting worse, degrading from what they used to be. Fossils, he didn't mention any of the gigantic fossils that have been found of people 8, 9, 10 feet tall, and there are hundreds of those. So as far as can an ape-like creature turn to a human, well, There's no evidence that any animal today produces something other than its same kind. The Nebraska man, which was used for years as evidence for evolution, all came from one tooth. From one tooth, they made Nebraska man, and the entire man and his wife were shown in Illustrated London News back in 1922, scientifically built up from one tooth. Later, they found out the tooth actually came from a pig. The Piltdown man was in the textbooks for 40 years. 1956, Reader's Digest ran an article saying, oh, this was proven to be false. It's not true. The Neanderthals, I think most folks who study them would say, yeah, they're probably normal humans, either living to great age or deformed from diseases like arthritis or vitamin deficiency disease. The 13% bigger brain on the Neanderthals is interesting. I think they're just simply pre-flood human, or people who shortly after the flood when they're still living to be 400. So I think the Christians or the biblical view would have a very reasonable answer to this. But again, I would go back to say every single bone you find in the dirt, you could not use it as evidence that it's an ancestor to anybody. None of that would count. In an honest court of law, the judge would say, you're right, no bones found in the dirt count. You did not demonstrate that you could prove that they had any children at all. Especially you did not prove they had children that were different than themselves. Again, I point out, none of the bones that he found could be proven to have had any children at all. So if he wants to believe that, that's perfectly fine. And I think, I doubt this will be answered, but how could you prove any of those thousands and thousands of bones you found in the dirt, even if you are reconstructing them correctly? And I won't argue that. Even if they look like they're intermediate between two different kinds of animals. Even if you find one that does look like it's half chimpanzee or half ape or half human. How could you prove they had any children that lived and that produced children again? So you have really three stages here. Could you prove they had children? No. Could you prove they had children that lived? No. Could you prove they had children that were able to produce something other than their kind? No. Apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, monkeys, humans are all having babies all over the world. Why don't we observe it today? Why is it only bones in the dirt that were able to do this? I'd like to see it happen today. Okay, I'd like to hear his response. Thank you.
Hi, I'm going to answer the question first. Do we need to know if an individual fossil ever reproduced? Absolutely not. It's just crazy to think that we would look at an individual fossil and have to know whether it reproduced, because every single fossil, or every individual, I should say, is a member of a population. Again, the straw man, dogs will always give birth to dogs. Animals always produce the same kind. Of course they do. Darwin predicted every species would give birth to the same species, but populations change over time. Would it hold up in a court of law? Absolutely it would. So bones and genetic evidence combined do not lie. The Neanderthal sequence falls outside the variation of modern humans. They were not modern humans. There's no way. You cannot make that claim. If you do, you're wrong. That's another straw man that Kent is bringing up, saying that we came from a rock. Do we believe we came from a rock? No, we don't believe we came from a rock. There are many hypotheses on how life began, but not a single one can be reduced to we came from a rock. Straw man argument. Here's one here. They talk about the conditions of life. Here's the Miller-Urey experiment, the meteorite hypothesis, the ocean iron sulfide hypothesis about deep sea vents, liquid membrane hypothesis about lipids, RNA world, origin of life. Here we go. Not a single one teaches we came from a rock. It's just another straw man.
And they certainly do teach that there was primordial soup that came from getting rained on the rocks. And you can watch my seminar part 1. That is exactly what the book teaches, that life had to come from soup, which came from the dissolving of the rocks. You can't replicate any of the fossils that he gave in the laboratory and show the Neanderthals had children. That is so different than trying to prove this child had these bones had children. So that was
we don't need to prove they had.
That was a real straw man argument. I mean, you're setting up a straw man and demolishing it and thinking you won the victory. But even if he showed that there is a certain percentage of DNA similarity, that doesn't answer the question. It doesn't prove the point at all that there's a common ancestor. He may wish to interpret it that way because he wants to, act like an ape or have no morals or something. I don't know what his motive is here. First of all, I don't know that it's true what you're saying, that human bones are not found in these layers. Secondly,
it's true.
Okay, just because you said it, that makes it true. Bill said it.
No, because the data shows it. Modern human fossil remains in the same layers as any of these more primitive species. We never have. And you have no explanation for that. None.
I do indeed. I said, who's looking? Who's cataloging this? Is there a motive to hide evidence if it was found? I think
so. A vast conspiracy is your answer?
That's not my answer. That is a possibility.
Well, where's this flood boundary? If you say there was a flood, where does it end in the fossil record?
I think nearly all of the layers of strata were formed at the same time. There is no fossil record.
All layers?
I said nearly all of those layers formed today in localized floods. Mount St. Helens deposited a thick layer of ash over my sister's yard.
That's not the same at all. That's volcanic. Well, where is the last sedimentary layer that was laid down by this flood you believe in? It should be really obvious, right? I mean,
no, I don't know.
You have no idea. Okay.
No, I think we could probably interpret it. But there are continent-wide layers of strata, like limestone, I believe, covers most of the 48 contiguous states. One layer of limestone. No,
not one layer.
Well, there are thousands of layers, hundreds of
different layers at different levels and different types of rock. Limestone, shale, Aeolian sandstone all require different environments to be made. They can't be made at the same time in the same year in the same single flood. We know that. So.